everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're having a great day. I haven't done a 10-minute painting for a little while, so I wanted to do that today. And while I did get something done in 10 minutes, kind of, I definitely worked longer and it really turned out to be more of like a 15-16 minute painting, but I'm gonna go ahead and have that first 10 minutes in real time. So if you wanted to follow along or just get a sense of what that process looks like in real time without any time lapse, that will be the first 10 minutes. And then those last 6 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and time lapse, speed it up a little bit so that it's not a giant long video. But yeah, I tend to paint a lot of things over and over that I really like. So if you've seen any other videos on my channel, you probably know some of the things I'm really into. Birds are definitely one of them, and horses too, as you can see by the two horses behind me. But for today, I did a bird that has some realism, combining that realism and abstraction, because in just such a short amount of time, you don't have a chance to add a ton of detail, but you can still get it looking recognizable and somewhat realistic. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So I am starting out with the more detailed brush. This is a size 3 round or round tip brush. And just going in and loading a lot of black on there. I wanted to make sure the paint was really saturated and thicker so that it would be a very dark black rather than watered down gray. And I'm first going to block in the shape of the eye. And since this is such a quick painting, if you've seen any of my other 10-minute painting videos, I don't start out with a sketch. I just go for it. That is absolutely not the case with longer paintings. When I want something to be truly proportionate and more accurate and I take a longer time with it, I always start with a very light pencil under sketch. But for these 10-minute paintings, since I'm just really wanting to get paint down on paper and just kind of let that creativity flow, I don't have the background sketch, and I'm not trying to stick too closely to proportions. Just have it be proportionate enough that you can see what type of subject matter it is. So I went in and I blocked in the shape of the eye, left a little white piece out for that kind of sheen and reflection in the eyeball. I'm going to fill in a tiny bit of detail later on. But this particular brush, I sometimes struggle with it very quickly soaking up the water, and then it won't move the paint around very well. So I may have to either look at a different brush or figure out the challenge. But anyway, with a fine tip brush, you can go in and add very fine lines and details. You'll want to make sure for those kind of creases in the skin around the eye that it's not too dark, and that was one of the things I was struggling with, getting enough paint on the brush so that you could see it, but then it was too dark, and then I try and go back and lighten the paint, and the water was just not moving the paint around on the page at all. So but you know, you do your best with the materials you have, and I've gone through a number of finer detail brushes before, and for some reason I sometimes struggle with this one. But anyhow, I did want to mix up sorry about the shaky screen. I have a new lamp which has amazing lighting, and it's able to sit on the desk surface, which is great, but sadly my desk is still shaking enough that it's causing a bit of a movement in the screen, so I'm sorry about that. Anyway, sidetrack. I'm mixing up an orangey tan color for the beak, so I used cadmium yellow medium and cadmium yellow light and a little bit of burnt sienna to get that deeper orangey brown tone. And then just kind of eyeballing to block in the shape of the beak. And when I say block in, just that means putting the general shape and then filling it in so that it looks like a filled in solid shape. And if you are curious, by the way, to see the reference image I am using, it's from unsplash.com. It is linked in the description, so feel free to go take a look at that if you'd like. All the images on there are from amazing photographers, but they are copyright free, which is nice. So I start out when I'm making these shapes with a general outline and then filling it in, and then you can get in some of the shading, add more paint for the darker areas, lighten things up by lifting paint if you need to. And excuse me, that's just what I'm doing right here. And start light enough with your paint so that if you need to either expand the shape, you don't have a really dark original demarcation outline and then try to expand it and it looks a little funny. And then vice versa, if you go a little too big, then you can blot up the paint and it won't be that noticeable if you need to make it smaller. As you can tell, I'm really spending a lot of time up front on these more detailed pieces. I spent, I think, probably about 6 minutes. And then I glanced up at my timer and realized, well, I better get a move on and get to some of the other areas. Otherwise, all we'll have is an eye and a beak, which won't look like much of anything. So after really spending the upfront detail on that to make sure I got at least those two things looking pretty realistic, then I, in a little bit here, expand out to that beautiful green feather color. And this is I believe it's some type of parakeet. So it might look like a parrot too, so they're in the same family. But I did add a little bit of the black to the underside of the beak for, I didn't get there quite yet. I added some Payne's gray. There's a portion of the beak that has some shadowing near the bottom, so I used the Payne's gray for that, and then later on I'll use black to create the sort of demarcation line between the upper part of the beak and the bottom part of the beak. Adding the little nostril in there. Okay, so here I am mixing up the green feather color. I'm using Viridian Hue, so Viridian Green, that's that more kind of teal green, and then Cadmium Yellow Light, very beautiful lemony yellow. And that just created the perfect lime green, and I'm really sorry about the camera shaking, you guys. I apologize, I'll have to figure that out. It's always a learning process. It's my first time using that lamp for one of these recorded tutorials because I just got it and it's a great lamp, but sometimes I'll need some fine tuning. Anyhow, I'm blocking in that lime green color and filling in the bottom portion of the beak here. And I'm switching back and forth throughout this entire painting between that size 3 round brush and then a size 6 round brush. And that size 6 round brush that I have, it's actually a very old one. I inherited it from my Grammy, who was an artist. And it's very flexible, so it's really good for filling in nice shapes pretty quickly. But you can also get it to a somewhat finer point to add a little bit of texture detail. Here's where I was talking about adding the black in between, so the shadowing between the two sides of the beak. And I really didn't have much time left here. I was starting to feel a little bit of urgency for trying to get a bird-looking head in 10 minutes. So I had just 2, maybe 3 minutes left here. Quickly filling in, not worrying too much about feather detail, just a little bit of texture by having some of the white of the paper show through. And it's in the later kind of 5-6 minutes after the 10 minutes that I work where we get a little more of some of the texture, but just very loosely brushing it in there and not being too careful about it, letting, like I said, that some of the white of the paper to show through to give a suggestion of texture. Adding some cadmium yellow in there because there's variation in the feather color so that it looks a little more realistic and not just a flat field of lime green. And making a sort of dabbing motion rather than long, smooth strokes will help also with creating a little bit of the texture. And it was at this point where I started to write the signature and I wasn't getting the brush loaded up enough with paint. Again, that was that issue of too much paint, it's too dark and thick, and I can't create fine lines. And then, so just that's part of the nature of that brush. And so at that point, you can hardly see the signature, but I was going, okay, I'm gonna abandon that and just keep working until I feel like this is a little bit more of a finished piece. But before that time lapse started, that was 10 minutes. And again, I think people would have looked at that and realized, oh yeah, that's a parakeet of some kind. But I just wanted to add a little more of the variety of color and detail. So I'm using, I think that's actually, instead of yellow ochre, which I believe I've called it that in the past, I think that is the raw sienna, that kind of golden brown color. And there was quite a bit of that coloring kind of at the very front of the beak and around the eye, and even a little bit of detail throughout the piece itself. So just filling in a little more texture, deepening things, adding some of those gold feathers, maybe a little bit of blue because there's blue feathers further down on the back, just to get it a little more of a finished look. And then being pretty liberal with the green paint here and then making some paint splatter. So it's fun to add the contrast of abstraction with a little more realism. Trying to fill in a little more of detail around the eye and softening the edges of that highlight in the eye. And then here, I believe I go ahead and spend a little more time on making that signature dark enough where you can see it and the lines are thin and more visible. And then there is the final piece. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. Until my next video, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, God bless, and I'll see you soon.